I want you to close your eyes for just a second and imagine this. It is a beautiful summer morning, the kind of morning where the sun is already warm by 9 o'clock, and the birds are doing their thing, and everything about the world feels safe and ordinary. A young mother gets up, gets her little boy dressed, clips the leash on the family dog, and heads out to the park. She is 23 years old. She is healthy and happy and completely in love with her life. She has a partner who adores her. She has a son who is about to turn 3. She has plans, big plans, dreams about moving to the French countryside one day, building a quiet, beautiful life somewhere warm and peaceful. She has absolutely no reason to believe that this morning, this ordinary golden summer morning, is the last morning she will ever see. And her little boy, her 2-year-old son, has no idea that the thing he is about to witness is going to live inside him for the rest of his life. By the time anyone found them, Rachel Nickell was dead, and her little boy Alex was standing over her body, pressing a piece of paper to her wounds like a bandage, repeating the same 3 words over and over and over again. "Wake up, Mummy." Welcome back to Case 0360. I'm your host, Masha, and today we are covering one of the most heartbreaking, most infuriating, most deeply disturbing true crime cases to ever come out of the United Kingdom. This is the story of Rachel Nickell, a story about a brutal murder in broad daylight in one of London's most public spaces. A story about a police investigation that went so catastrophically wrong that an innocent man had his entire life destroyed. A story about a real killer who walked free for 16 years while investigators chased the wrong person. And a story about a little boy who grew up carrying the weight of what he saw that morning in ways that most of us cannot even begin to comprehend. This one is heavy, this one is real, and this one matters. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Rachel Jane Nickell was born on the 23rd of November 1968 in Essex, England. From everything that people who knew her have said, Rachel was one of those rare people who genuinely made the world brighter just by being in it. She volunteered with elderly people, she worked with disabled children, she trained as a dancer. She was warm and kind and full of life in a way that people noticed immediately. When she met her partner Andre Hanscom at a swimming pool in Richmond, she called her mother that same night and told her she had just met the man she was going to spend the rest of her life with. She just knew. That kind of certainty, that kind of joy, that was Rachel. She and Andre were young, money was tight, they were figuring things out the way young couples do, but they were happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. They had their son Alex, their dog Molly, their little apartment, and their big dreams about the future. On the morning of July 15, 1992, Rachel did what she did on so many mornings. She took Alex and Molly out for a walk on Wimbledon Common, a large open green space in southwest London. Wimbledon Common is not a remote wilderness. It is not some isolated location where people rarely go. It is a public park in the middle of one of the most populated cities in the world, less than a mile from the All England Lawn Tennis Club where Wimbledon Championship matches had been played just 2 weeks earlier. People walk their dogs there every single day. Families go there on weekends. Joggers use the paths. It is the kind of place where you feel safe because you are surrounded by the ordinary rhythms of daily life. Rachel and Alex and Molly were walking through a slightly more secluded wooded area of the common when a man appeared. What happened next took only minutes. The attacker sexually assaulted Rachel and then stabbed her 49 times. 49 times. The ferocity of the attack was so extreme that one of the wounds nearly decapitated her. He then fled, leaving Rachel dying on the ground and leaving Alex, who was just a few weeks shy of his 3rd birthday, completely alone with his mother's body. A passerby found them. Alex was standing over Rachel, pressing a piece of paper gently against her wounds like he was trying to help her. He was saying, "Wake up, Mummy." He said it 3 times, and on the 3rd time, somehow, even at 2 years old, he understood that she was not coming back. I need to take a moment here because I think it is important not to rush past that image. A 2-year-old child, alone in a park, trying to wake his mother up. That is not just a detail in a crime story. That is the human reality at the center of this case, and it should be treated with the weight it deserves. Everything that follows, all the investigation failures, all the courtroom drama, all the years of wrong turns, happens in the shadow of that moment. That little boy standing over his mother is the reason this case matters and the reason we are talking about it today. The murder of Rachel Nickell hit Britain like a shockwave. There was something about the specific details, the beautiful young mother, the public park, the broad daylight, the child witness, that made the whole country stop cold. The Metropolitan Police were under immediate and enormous pressure to find the killer. The media coverage was relentless. Every newspaper in Britain had Rachel's face on the front page. Every television newscast led with the story. The public wanted answers, and they wanted them fast. And that pressure, that desperate, urgent need to solve this case and give the public something, is directly responsible for what went wrong next. Because in the weeks and months following Rachel's murder, the police investigation began to fall apart in ways that were not obvious at the time, but would later prove to be catastrophic. The forensic technology available in 1992 was not what it is today. The small amount of biological evidence recovered from the scene could not be properly analyzed with the tools investigators had available. A full month into the investigation, police still could not even definitively confirm certain basic facts about the attacker from the physical evidence alone. They were essentially working blind, under enormous public pressure, in a case that the entire country was watching. Desperate for direction, they brought in a criminal psychologist named Paul Britton to create a psychological profile of the killer. Britton's profile described someone who was likely a socially isolated male in his 20s or 30s living close to Wimbledon Common, with specific interests that included knives, the occult, and violent sexual fantasies. And based on that profile, investigators turned their attention to a man named Colin Stagg. Colin Stagg was 29 years old, unemployed, and lived near Wimbledon Common. He walked his dog on the common regularly. He had previously been investigated for a minor unrelated matter. He was, by his own admission, socially isolated and a somewhat eccentric person. He fit the profile. And so police decided he was their man. Not because of forensic evidence, not because of eyewitness testimony, but because of a profile. Because a psychologist said the killer was probably someone like this, and Colin Stagg was someone like this. And in the desperation of a high-profile unsolved murder investigation, that was enough to set a chain of events in motion that would destroy an innocent man's life. What the Metropolitan Police did next is one of the most controversial and frankly shameful chapters in modern British policing history. They ran an undercover honey trap operation. A female police officer using a false identity made contact with Colin Stagg and developed what appeared to be a romantic relationship with him over several months. She was instructed to get him to confess to the murder. The operation involved the undercover officer sending letters and having conversations in which she encouraged Stagg to describe violent sexual fantasies, with the goal of getting him to eventually admit he had committed the crime. She would hint that she had done dark things herself, that she could only be with someone who shared her capacity for darkness, essentially trying to manipulate him psychologically into a confession by convincing him that admitting to murder would draw her closer to him. Colin Stagg never confessed. Not once, because he did not do it. But the letters he wrote in response to the undercover officer's increasingly provocative prompts, letters where he described violent fantasies because a woman he believed was romantically interested in him seemed to want him to, were presented as evidence of his guilt. Paul Britton interpreted these letters as consistent with the profile of Rachel's killer, and in 1993, Colin Stagg was charged with the murder of Rachel Nickell. The trial collapsed in 1994. The judge threw the case out before it even reached the jury. The judge's ruling was devastating for the police and the prosecution. He described the undercover operation as an attempt to manipulate an innocent man into a false confession and called the entire strategy, and I am paraphrasing here, reprehensible. Colin Stagg walked free. But walking free from a murder charge is not the same as walking away untouched. Stagg had been in custody on remand. His name had been publicly connected to the murder of Rachel Nickell in one of the most heavily covered criminal cases in recent British history. He had been convicted in the court of public opinion before a single piece of evidence was tested in front of a jury. Even after the acquittal, there were people who believed he did it. He faced harassment. He faced hostility. He lived for years under the shadow of a crime he had absolutely nothing to do with. His life was fundamentally altered by the decision of investigators, who were so certain they had the right man that they were willing to run an illegal covert operation, rather than look for actual evidence. And while all of that was happening, while Colin Stagg's life was being dismantled and the real investigation effectively stalled, the actual killer was out there, living his life. Free. His name was Robert Napper. Robert Napper was a deeply disturbed and violent man who had come to the attention of police on multiple occasions before Rachel's murder and would continue to commit serious crimes afterward. His profile of violence included other sexual assaults in the Wimbledon Common area in the period before Rachel's murder. There were women who had reported being attacked or followed on and near the Common, and those reports, had they been properly connected and investigated, might have led police to Napper before Rachel Nickell ever took that walk. But the dots were not connected, the intelligence was not shared, and Napper continued to offend. In November 1993, while Colin Stagg was still publicly labeled as the prime suspect in Rachel's murder, Robert Napper broke into a home in Plumstead, southeast London, and killed Samantha Bissett, a 27-year-old woman, and her 4-year-old daughter Jasmine. The brutality of those murders and specific forensic details about the way they were carried out should have immediately triggered a review of the Rachel Nickell case. There were similarities that forensic investigators could see, but the investigation was slow to connect the cases, and Napper was not arrested until 1994 for the Bissett murders. He was committed to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital, after being found to be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. And even then, even with Napper in a secure facility, the formal link to Rachel Nickell took years more to establish. It was advances in DNA technology that finally provided the answer. In the mid-2000s, forensic scientists were able to re-examine the tiny biological sample recovered from Rachel's body using techniques that simply did not exist in 1992. The DNA matched Robert Napper. The case that had been one of Britain's most haunting unsolved murders for over a decade was suddenly, irrevocably solved. It was not Colin Stagg. It was never Colin Stagg. It was Robert Napper, the man who had been sitting in Broadmoor for years, the man who had killed Samantha and Jasmine Bissett, the man whose attacks near Wimbledon Common had been reported and not fully followed up on before Rachel ever died. In December 2008, 16 years after Rachel Nickell was murdered on Wimbledon Common, Robert Napper appeared in court and pleaded guilty to her manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility. He was ordered to remain in Broadmoor indefinitely. Colin Stagg received an official apology from the Metropolitan Police and a financial settlement, though no amount of money and no formal apology can give back the years that were taken from him. And then there is Alex. Little Alex, who pressed paper to his mother's wounds and said, "Wake up, Mummy." Alex Hanscom grew up with his father Andre, who by every account poured himself completely into protecting and raising his son after the most unimaginable loss a family can experience. Andre has spoken about how in the immediate aftermath of the murder, he made a decision to put his own grief entirely to one side because Alex needed him present and focused and strong. He moved Alex out of England eventually, tried to build a life somewhere quieter, somewhere the media spotlight could not follow them so easily. Alex grew into an adult carrying the weight of being the only witness to his mother's murder, of having been used by police as a source of evidence at an age when most children are learning their alphabet, of growing up with a story attached to his name that the entire world knew about. In 2026, with the Netflix series bringing Rachel's story back to the front of the public conversation, Alex spoke about his mother. He spoke about who she was, the warmth, the kindness, the love. He spoke about his father and the extraordinary job Andre did raising him under impossible circumstances. And he spoke about memory and grief and carrying something like that through your whole life. He served as a consultant on the dramatization of events, which tells you something about the kind of person he is. He did not turn away from the story. He stepped toward it. He wanted the world to know who his mother really was, not just as a victim in a crime story, but as a person. Rachel Nickell was a 23-year-old woman who loved her son, loved her partner, loved her dog, and was walking through a park on a summer morning when the world turned on her in the most violent and senseless way possible. She deserved better. Her family deserved better. And the system failed her twice, first by not catching the right man before she died, and then by spending years destroying an innocent man's life instead of finding the person who actually did it. This case is a reminder that the pressure to close a case, to give the public an answer, to be seen to be doing something, that pressure can corrupt an investigation more thoroughly than almost anything else. When investigators stop looking for evidence and start looking for evidence that fits the answer they have already decided on, innocent people suffer and guilty people go free. That is not just a British problem. That is a human problem, and it happens more than any of us would like to believe. Rachel Nickell, say her name. Remember who she was, not just what happened to her. That is going to be our case for today on Case 0360. I'm Masha, and I want to thank every single one of you for watching and for caring enough to sit with stories that are this difficult and this real. If this episode moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are not already here, and share this video because Rachel's story deserves to be heard by as many people as possible. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think the Metropolitan Police ever truly faced accountability for what they did to Colin Stagg? I want to know your thoughts. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I will see you on the next case. This is Case 0360.